Well, today we're going to be witnessing Paul saying things like, you know who I am? You know who you're talking to?
He's challenging the idea of false apostles.
Yes.
So he's Chris and I'm Jeff, and we're the Bible guys.
Okay, Jeff, good morning.
Good morning.
And I would like to read for you a segment called Who Said It?
Oh,
And this is the Bible version. It's kind of like, do you ever see those like Monopoly games that are Bibleopoly?
Yes, Bible. Yeah,
Or
yeah.
Bible trivia,
Sure.
Trivia Pursuit.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Who Said It Bible version.
Okay, so these are people in the Bible.
Yeah, and they
Oh, no.
somebody quoted it, and you have to say who's the one that said this.
Okay.
These are actually, I'm looking at them for the very first time. They were handed to me.
Yeah.
These are super incredibly easy.
Are they easy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you know what that means?
That makes me even more nervous.
Right, because if you miss it, that means that you missed easy things. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first.
Jesus said that.
Yeah. Okay. Number 2, he who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me.
John the Baptist.
Yep. Oh, what a great sin these people have committed. They have made themselves gods of gold. Yeah, that could be one of two people.
Ooh. I'm going to say Moses.
It was Moses.
Okay.
And now these 3 remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.
Paul.
Okay, last one. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil.
That's David.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Oh, man, that made me nervous.
these are some of the most iconic scriptures in the Bible.
Yeah, well, that's great. I'm glad. So thank you, Desiree, for giving me a layup on that one. She helps us out with the segments.
Yeah.
So maybe we should just call the show The Bible Guy.
The Bible guy, because it's you.
Because I got them all right.
You're 5 for 5. Hey, by the way, I would have appreciated more of these obscure ones, like number 3, the Moses one.
Yeah.
Because when you choose things that are multiple, it's like, well,
That's right.
did Aaron say that?
That's right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been good. But those other ones are super famous.
Yeah. That was great. Well, good.
But yeah, I didn't mean to put Desiree down.
No. I'm glad she did it. Thank you, Desiree.
Yeah, very good.
That helped tremendously that you didn't embarrass us.
Hey, by the way, if Desiree
She
does,
appreciates her job. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Good job. You get to stay with us, Desiree.
hey, if she is listening to this, I don't know if she listens.
Sure, she listens to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Desiree, do me a favor, pick more obscure ones, so then next time.
When Chris does it.
No. We'll see. I didn't boast about being the Bible guy.
Well, I didn't before the questions. It was after the
Hey,
questions.
speaking of boast,
Yeah.
this is what actually Paul is doing. He feels foolish about doing it too.
Well, that's how he starts this off right here. Oh, what a great transition. You nailed
Yeah,
it, dude.
thank you.
You're getting good at this.
Hey, segue.
Yeah, okay.
King of segue.
So we are in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. We've been going through the book of Acts in the beginning of the first church, if you're just new with us. And so as we go through the book of Acts, then we wind up, when we come to a spot where a new book was written or new letters were written by Paul, then we pause and go through those letters, and then we'll go back. So right now, this is in the second letter, or the third or fourth letter, depending on how you view this, in 2 Corinthians, and we're reading in chapter 11. We're just going to read the first 15 verses or so in the New Living Translation. It says, I hope you will put up with a little more of my foolishness. Please bear with me. For I am jealous for you with the jealousy of God himself. I promised you as a pure bride to one husband, Christ. But I fear that somehow your pure and undivided devotion to Christ will be corrupted, just as Eve was deceived by the cunning ways of the serpent. You happily put up with whatever anyone tells you, even if they preach a different Jesus than the one we preach, or a different kind of spirit than the one you received, or a different kind of gospel than the one that you believed. But I don't consider myself inferior in any way to these super apostles who teach such things. I may be unskilled as a speaker, but I'm not lacking in knowledge. We have made this clear to you in every possible way. Was I wrong when I humbled myself and honored you by preaching God's good news to you without expecting anything in return? I robbed other churches by accepting their contributions so I could serve you at no cost. And when I was with you and didn't have enough to live on, I did not become a financial burden to anyone, for the brothers who came from Macedonia brought me all that I needed. I've never been a burden to you, and I never will be. As surely as the truth of Christ is in me, no one in all of Greece will ever stop me from boasting about this. Why? Because I don't love you? God knows that I do. But I will continue doing what I've always done. This will undercut those who are looking for an opportunity to boast that their work is just like ours. These people are false apostles. They're deceitful workers who disguise themselves as apostles of Christ. But I am not surprised. Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it's no wonder that his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. In the end, they will get the punishment their wicked deeds deserve.
Yeah, there you go. So, it's important for our listeners who've been following us a long time, in other words, like through this journey of 2 Corinthians, understand that this is sort of a topic that's been touched on several times.
Yeah. He keeps circling back to this big idea.
He circles back to the big idea. So as he's writing, keep in mind, this is writing in one sitting, right? This is the delivery of a letter. So he feels just as passionate about this as he did, let's just say, like 5 podcasts ago. Right. Because this is the same letter. So he still has the same feelings, the same anxious thoughts.
Right.
And I love how he says, again, I've just been sort of harping on this, but Paul is the master illustrator.
Yeah.
If he were a presenter, he would have used props all day long.
Oh, probably.
Yeah, he's the one who, he's a visual learner, he's a visual teacher. And so he talks about how he says, I promised you as a pure bride to one husband, Christ, but I fear that somehow your pure and undivided devotion to Christ will be corrupted. And he's not talking about behavior in this case. He's talking about a bride being corrupted by false doctrine,
right?
A church being corrupted by false doctrine.
That's true.
Because think about it. Just as a bride dedicates herself to one man, Paul's making the comparison and saying, Jesus being the groom, the bridegroom, and the church being the bride, which we are called the bride, right, of Christ. Mm-hmm. He's talking about the purity. So he's using that analogy. He's taking it one step further.
Yeah.
Just dedicate yourself to one man, to the groom. And he's saying you're not doing that because if you're accepting false doctrine, your attention, your devotion is divided to another one besides Jesus.
Right. And I think it's interesting. He recognizes the fact that he's an unskilled speaker. Right.
Dude, I love the fact that he did that.
Right.
Well, we're speakers.
Sure.
Right. We speak.
Sure.
So, but for the layman, it's still really encouraging.
Well, you think of him as being like Superman. He can do everything.
Right.
And instead, just a couple days ago, we talked about how he talked about being afraid. Even though he was in persecution, when we read the persecution, because we're just blowing through the stories, what happens over months or years, we read in a paragraph, and it just kind of condenses it, and you think, man, this guy was fearless. He went through all kinds of persecution. He did all these things, and God just made him like Superman Christian. And then here, you feel like, oh, he's great at spreading the gospel all around the known world at the time because he was such a compelling speaker. And he was such a good teacher. If I was that kind of guy, I would do it too. And it turns out Paul goes, so I'm not a very good speaker. And I admit it.
Right.
And so it wasn't that he was super brave, and it wasn't that he was a great, compelling speaker. Other times he says, hey, I didn't come with the wisdom of the world. As a matter of fact, when you listen to me, I sounded like a fool, right? So he wasn't a compelling speaker. And so what he was he was available and obedient. God said, go, and he went. Right. The greatest ability is availability. And he just did what God told him to do, and God made him incredibly effective, which should encourage all of us. We don't have to be super speakers. We don't have to be super brave. We just have to be willing to start, and God will do the work.
Yeah, so the quote that he uses is he says, I don't consider myself inferior in any way to these super apostles who teach these things. Then he says, I may be an unskilled speaker, but I'm not lacking in knowledge. And so he's recognizing his strengths and weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And so and I love to talk about this particularly, but Ephesians 4:11, how later on he says that he gives to the church, God gives to the church, some with spiritual gifts to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, some to be pastors, and some to be teachers. Mm-hmm. And he gives to the church these gifts, and then he goes on to talk about for the perfecting of the saints, for the growing up of the mature, so that we may be made, mature and into Jesus. So he talks about the purpose of those gifts in the church. But anyway, all of that to say this. So he is the one who is most famous. When we say apostle, the first thing that comes off of our lips is Paul.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Even though the other disciples were apostles.
Yeah, you're going to say Apostle Paul, Apostle Peter. Those are the first two.
Yes, those are the first two.
Yep.
But Paul is actually acting in his gift, and I love the fact that he's talking about it, because the gift of an apostle is different than that of a teacher. Mm-hmm. It's a different spiritual gift altogether. So I remember reading a book. The Forgotten Ways.
Oh yeah.
But what's his name? La la la. Okay,
I remember it.
Yeah, The Forgotten Ways. And anyway,
Alan Hirsch.
And I remember the breakdown. He says this: the apostle is the one who goes. Mm-hmm. The prophet is the one who knows. The evangelist is the one who recruits. The teacher is the one who explains, and the pastor is the one who cares.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so, and really what he's saying is this. He's saying, like, you need all five. And he actually laid out in the book that they build upon one another sequentially.
Yeah.
So you need, first, for any mission, an apostle who says, hey, we're going to go take this hill. We're going to take this city for Christ. And then once you have an apostle to set the mission, then you have the prophet who discerns. And the prophet's the guy who says, I think God's telling us to start in that cafe, right? Mm-hmm. And then once you have a plan and a direction, then what you need is somebody with the gift of evangelism, right? Mm-hmm. You need somebody who just is naturally gifted at sharing the gospel. And that person just goes in and recruits. And then once you have a body of believers, then what you need are the last two gifts. Those are the inward gifts.
Right.
So the first three are outward gifts.
That's right.
The inward gifts are pastor, teacher, one who cares and one who explains. Well, Paul is the guy, because this is he's writing this letter on his third missionary journey, mm-hmm. but he established this church in Corinth on his first missionary journey, right? So he's the guy who travels all around the Mediterranean rim, and he's the guy who starts things. And so think about his gifts. He's an influencer. Mm-hmm. He may not be a good speaker,
right?
But he's a mover and a shaker, man.
Right.
Right. But he's not the guy to get up every Sunday morning, right?
Yeah.
And maintain the church.
Yeah. And it wasn't that he was so super courageous. It was he was willing to put up with the punishment that was coming with it.
Yeah.
It was, we were laughing about this a while ago when you asked me, how do you see, the end of the movie of your life? And I'm like, just walking into the jungle and disappearing, right?
I thought that was the funniest thing. That's so funny.
I think that's the kind of attitude Paul had.
Yeah.
Was he wasn't afraid of the struggle. That part of it, he was afraid, certainly, but he knew the struggle was necessary in order to achieve what it was that he was achieving, right? And I think that his goal of reaching people who were far from Christ, his goal of going to places where there had never been a gospel representation, it was like the ticket at the door. Yeah. The cost at the door for that was, I'm probably going to go to jail. I'm probably going to get beat up. Eventually, they're probably going to kill me.
Yeah.
That's really scary to me.
Yeah.
But the value of reaching people far exceeds it. So I'm not a very good speaker. I'm fearful, but the delight of sharing the gospel compels me, and so I'm going to go anyways. And those apostolic type leaders, that's very different from the guy. Like he doesn't. Sometimes Paul says a ton by not saying it, and here there's a lot of sarcasm in this chapter, right? So he's like, what do I say these things because I don't love you? God knows I do, or whatever. But he's kind of taking shots at the quote unquote super apostles.
Right, which I love.
Right.
Super apostles.
And it doesn't say anything else really beyond that.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a warning there. I hate naming names like from stage. I just don't say this pastor or that pastor is a bad guy or this. I don't care for that. And so Paul, he only does it a few times where he names somebody, but there's a lot of times when he uses kind of this, he's referencing these quote unquote super apostles. And what he's saying is there's a certain attitude of a person that you should not follow. So they're coming in and they're using Jesus words, but they're not talking about the same Jesus we're talking about. They're using faith concepts, but they're not talking about the faith that I brought. They're talking about Holy Spirit stuff, but they're not talking about the Holy Spirit you received, right? And they come in like they're super apostles, and they have all this authority, and they got all this swagger, and they're so cool, and they're so impressive. And Paul is like, I'm not any of those things. You should watch out for those people. Yeah. And I would just say the kind of person who comes rolling in their Benz and they act like they know everything and they're so clearly living for the riches of it and the benefits. He's like, watch out for them. They're pretenders. And I've been around people who demand that they be called apostle so and so.
Right,
or bishop so and so,
right.
So I was in a meeting one time about a year ago. I was in a meeting and it was all pastors. So we're all ministry people, And so I referenced this guy, and I said his name. I'm not going to say his name. I said his name, and he steps up and he goes, "Yeah, I'm Bishop so-and-so." And I said,
Yeah.
"Oh, I just think of him as," and I said his name again because I thought he was joking. And he said, "I prefer Bishop."
Right.
And I was like, "What?"
And you're like, uh-oh.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, sorry. And then I never referenced him the rest of the day because I'm like, wow.
Well, part of that is cultural. So part of that is
Well,
like,
I don't think this was.
okay. Let's just leave it at that.
That's it.
Leave it at that.
This wasn't a cultural thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, I was given some really great advice when I was a teenager in my young 20s. And the older you get, the more you realize how strong this statement is. But I remember getting some job offer, some ministry job offer, and it paid a little bit more money than the average job offer and everything else. But the church that was offering it was not a healthy church, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so I remember calling my youth pastor at the time, my pastor of high school students who I was under. Jim was his name. And I remember calling him and I said, "Hey, I get this job offer." And he made this statement that stuck with me. And I think you probably know what I'm going to say. He said, "Chris," he said, "everything that glitters isn't gold."
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, like just because I was so fascinated with the glitter, right?
Sure.
Just the shiny salary and everything else, right? And that's what this is.
Yes.
It reminds me of Paul's sort of saying super apostles with these fancy, speeches and persuasions.
Yeah.
And he's like, but it lacks content.
Right.
Which is why he's saying, like, I have knowledge.
Yeah.
I have content. And a simple presentation with pure content is worth far more than a fancy presentation that seems impressive, but it doesn't have substance.
Sure. Sometimes I'm nervous about people will say, "Hey, what authors are you paying attention to? What theologian should I listen to? What apologists should I pay attention to?" And human sin, we fail.
Yeah.
So people can have a great body of work,
right,
and then have a massive character flaw, and then we're all disappointed by them or whatever, right? So I'm always nervous. The easiest theologians to recommend are the dead ones.
Right.
because they're not going to ruin their reputation.
They're not
hilarious. They're not going to have any. So I give away often. I buy them by the case. Norm Geisler's Systematic Theology in one volume.
Yeah.
Right. And I like it because he kind of splits the middle. He'll give you 4 or 5 opinions, kind of split the middle and say, I kind of stand here. But he'll give you all the sides, right? So I like that. He's not the only theologian, but he's a good one from the 20th century. And so I'll give that one away. And I had somebody ask, how come you always give this one away? I said, because he just died. That's why.
Yeah.
I didn't give it away a lot while they were alive because people fail. And he's kind of recognizing the frailty of leadership. Right? That humans will change, they'll shift. And so one of his defenses, and there's great value in this, verse 12, but I will continue doing what I've always done. So if you're trying to figure out, is this person somebody I should follow? Mm-hmm. Look at their body of work over a long period of time. Somebody comes blowing on the scene. They wrote a book. They're speaking at 2 or 3 conferences, and they've got 3 years of ministry experience. Okay, they may or may not have something valuable to add. Just don't build your life around them or build your belief systems around them or start burning spiritual bridges theologically or relationally over somebody who only has a short track record. Paul says, listen, I've been doing this for a long time, and my reputation with you has been impeccably consistent.
Right.
And so he said, you can trust me. And he says this, just my lifestyle and my willingness to continue to be consistent will undercut those who are looking for an opportunity to boast about their work. Right. So I think that there's great value. One of the benefits, you and I are getting into right now we're kind of at the peak of our influence in the 50s, right? Typically in church work is 50s or that way. But eventually we're going to move into kind of an elder statesman kind of a role or a mentor kind of role, right? That's what happens. And a lot of times the young guys will forget or ignore or go, oh, you just don't understand, the older guys. But there's a lot of value in paying attention to those guys. Maybe not for methods, but certainly with regard to theology and to orthodoxy and all those kinds of things. And so this is what Paul's saying. Paul's not going after their methods. Paul's going after their theology and their orthodoxy. And these guys are teaching a false doctrine. But then he says, I'm not surprised. Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light.
Yeah.
We tend to think it's only evil things that the devil's trying to get us to do. And the reality is the devil doesn't dress himself up as, some kind of evil nightmare. The devil dresses himself up as an angel of light, that all that glitters isn't always gold. That's a true thing.
Well, I love my Life Application Study Bible. It has a note on that, and it says this: one Jewish writing, and it refers to the Apocalypse of Moses, says that the story of Eve's temptations includes Satan masquerading as an angel. Paul may have been thinking of this story, or he could have been referring to Satan's typical devices. In either case, nothing can be more deceitful than Satan, the prince of darkness. Then it references a couple of scriptures, Ephesians 6:12, Colossians 1:13, disguising himself as an angel of light in the same way the false apostles were pretending to be the apostles of Christ, servants of righteousness, while in reality, they were agents of Satan.
Yep. I think of, I'm not saying that the city is bad, but I'm thinking about the flashing lights and the false fronts of Las Vegas.
Sure.
Or it's they're trying to attract you with the pretty and the beautiful. But hey, Disney is similar. So much of what you see in Disney is fake. If you just look behind the scenes, it's just stick-built stuff, but it looks so amazing on the outside. Or have you ever been like on a Hollywood? Some of those sets, like at Universal or whatever, and you drive through, and you're driving down a street, and it's this amazing city. It feels like you're in New York City, and then when you go behind, it's just a wall. There's nothing there. There's nothing behind it. It's just fake, and that's what he's saying is the devil does a lot.
So my daughter loves The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, the Jim Carrey version.
Yeah.
And when we went to California, we drove through Hollywood Studios. We took the tour, and there was a section in the back, just this forgotten section, where it was Whoville.
Oh, wow.
And they drove us through Whoville, and it was just all, run down. They just sort of let it just, be a victim to the weather.
Sure.
And Tori's like, I go, Tori, wasn't that cool? She goes, well, no, because now, it's ceased to be Whoville in my mind. and now it's just like these couple facade buildings in the middle of a field, right? Exposing it for what it really was, right?
That's right.
I thought it was super cool for her. And she's like, no, the opposite. She wanted it to be Whoville.
Right. So he says it's no wonder that wicked people will disguise themselves as good teachers. So he says you constantly need to be testing him. In Acts earlier, we read about how he commends the Bereans because he would come in and teach, and then they'd go home and study the word for themselves to make sure that what he was teaching was true. And he says, man, you guys should all be like that. And so I think that's it, that we should test every teaching through what the Bible says. We should look at the lifestyle and the track record over a long period of time of Christian leaders, and then give those people the benefit of the doubt over the brand new flashy one that's coming in with a new teaching or a new idea.
Yeah, and one last thing before we go is I would just say, if a person does have decades of faithfulness and then the person has a moral failure, would you please stop canceling his entire life or her entire life?
Sure.
Right? Because the bottom line is yes, of course they had a failure, and it might even be a huge failure, but people get tired. Right. They get weary, right? They get human, they get discouraged. They run out of juice.
If they're successful ministry-wise, they're a bigger target for the devil. So temptation is going to be greater. All those kinds of things. Yeah. Spiritual warfare is going to be greater. Yeah.
And then I find myself referencing somebody who may have had a failure at the end of their life. But they've had 40 years of phenomenal ministry, and somebody's like, oh, you can't use them in a reference.
Yeah. So there are things that we can do that we can disqualify ourselves from future ministry.
Yeah.
But what we do doesn't necessarily negate the past ministry.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's probably a great place to end. And we will see you tomorrow, hopefully, on the Bible Guys.